Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second call talk session for 2023. We are very happy to have you all. Yep. And today we've been talking more about cost management, which is a continuation of our previous session where we just touched it on a high level and had the Azure Governance introduction. Important note here is that this view is based on our experience, which is a combination of the Microsoft formal cloud adoption framework and well-architected framework, but mostly it's let's say combination of how we see some of the techniques that can be applied with the customers, and it's entirely based on our experience. So it's tied to the formal approach, but it's not the formal approach.
Yeah, it's still a perspective.
It's still a perspective.
Yeah.
Yep. So as usual, we will start with some of the updates in the past month, and then we'll dive deeper in the cost management part of the cost management discipline of the Azure Governance framework. And at the end, you'll have a chance to ask questions, and hopefully we'll have some kind of discussion. We will be more than happy to hear your perspective, your experience from your customers. So for the people who joined for first time, my name is Nikolai Markov. I've been working in the IT field for more than 20 years. My main focus is cloud technologies. And in general, I'm trying to help large organization and small organization to adopt the cloud, get all the benefits from it, make sure that they are doing the cloud adoption right. And in general, I love what I'm doing.
I think we've done this so many times now that I'm finding it hard to put some variety in this text, but yeah, kind of the same past, been involved with a lot of the cloud stuff, but focusing mostly on the collaboration pieces as well as the Azure side of things.
Yep, I can conduct that. We've both been in the IT field for a long time, and this not only means that we are pretty old, but also means that we've been able to see multiple changes in the organization in different domains in our IT technologies. So starting with what's new, first, as usual, we'll start with the Azure updates. So not let's say some mind-blowing updates, but still. So the first thing is AKS. Now we'll have 2 tiers in preview. I'll talk a little bit more after this announcement. So we'll have caching in ACR. And also we have some additional functionality added to the Azure Virtual Network Manager, which was long waiting, let's say, its feature.
Following up on the M365 changes, there's some welcomed updates to the change management capabilities that we have in the portal, as well as the now regular Microsoft Teams monthly updates. I think Teams by now is probably the most updated app in that suite. As well as the appointments app is also another capability they introduced recently to Teams. For the Power Platform, I'm only focusing on one topic, which is the next generation AI integration, aka ChatGPT. This was actually news that was announced on Monday, so it's pretty fresh. So I'll give some updates there. And on the security front, we have some conditional access updates to authentication context capabilities for PIM. and the other updates are related, not so technical, but I think it's worth noting that the Microsoft Endpoint suite has been recognized as one of the best in the Gartner quadrant recently, as well as some purview information barriers updates.
Cool. So let's get started. As said, starting with this new feature, which actually this new AKS tiers introduced recently. Actually, this was so previously there were customers which were aware of this. However, the goal of Microsoft is to make this, let's say, more popular to the other customers and to understand that, to understand it all about this offering, especially for their mission critical workloads and let's say use cases where you have more AKS clusters. So the new standard here is it's actually is recommended control plane management option, which is which come with greater control in terms of uptime, SLA, scalability, etc. So in the past, we always assumed that the AKS management plane and control plane, they're coming for free and you're paying only for the resources. And now you can have, let's say, additional SLA support. And actually the price, I would say, it's not that much. It's just 10 cents per cluster.
Per hour.
Per hour, yeah, that's important notice. But yeah, I believe that this would be pretty good for organizations which are not which is hosting their mission critical workloads. Even for small organization is also an option, but especially when you have more nodes, this would be definitely something to look after. Moving forward to the caching in Azure container registry. So this allows you to cache to create a cache rules and cache container images. Currently, only Docker Hub and Microsoft Artifact Registry are supported, but most probably this will be expanded. There's also some limitation in terms of that you can configure it only through the portal, which, to be honest, is the biggest limitation, I would say. But I believe that this would be fixed very fast. And the main benefit of that is that you get a performance improvement. So the images would be pulled directly from the cache, which would be much more faster. So in large environments, some of you know that this definitely have impact sometimes, especially when there's a lot of environments and pulling images simultaneously. Sometimes it may become pretty slow. So I would say a nice feature. And again, the Azure Virtual Network Manager, which we discussed in the previous meeting in details, now have additional functionality where we can have a logging of what happened within this service in general, and we can monitor changes, for example, in network group membership by and having these logs, and we can access them by through Azure Monitor Walk Analytics or the portal, and or we can store them in the storage account, whatever. But we have some kind of traceability what happened in our network group. So yeah, that's short update from Azure side. Moving forward to the M365.
So like I said, they've announced another way you can track your changes in M365 for the people who some of you on the call already aware how much of a challenge this actually is, given how many updates they announce almost daily. It's hard to actually manage this process effectively, especially if you're one of the admins who needs to follow up on some of these items. Previously, you could have integrated this with Planner, so all of the changes that are announced in the portal will sync over to a Planner plan, and you can manage this as like a PM tool instead of doing this from the portal. I guess this did. I mean, some people were using it, but I guess it didn't really pick up. So they're trying to integrate this experience directly into the portal by having the ability to flag some of the events. And also, one other important update is it will show you if the update has actually made it to your tenant. I'm not sure yet how reliable this is as an information, because we've seen plenty of updates over the years that were supposed to be GA, but the tenant didn't actually get them on time. So, but just another good update for the change management process. Moving on. A Microsoft Teams, a couple of updates from Microsoft Teams. The first one is they've given us the ability to create meeting templates. So if you're a heavy user of Teams, and especially if you have different kind of calls, if you're a project manager or some sort of a role that involves a lot of different meetings that you meet, different audiences, where you will have client meetings, you will have internal meetings, you will have leadership meetings. Some of these would actually be different in the way they've been set up, with different settings. So they've actually announced the ability to create templates based on the needs. Building on top of that, they allow you to brand some of that meeting experience, like the lobby. Especially if you have a client meeting, or if you went through a number of acquisitions where in front of the external clients you have to present yourself with a different company name, or just brand this totally individually, you will be able to do this with this new capability, as well as watermarking. Not sure if it's visible on that upper that little snippet that I took from the phone, the phone client. You can do watermarking, where you can actually put your either your label or the company name or some sort of a branding. You can put it directly into the meeting experience as well. I think by now they're just mostly refining the experience of Teams, making sure it's up there with the other tools that allow good meeting experience, especially if you're a sales organization. Some of these things are really important, being able to cope and really cater your clients. Moving on. The next one is the Appointments app, which allows you to manage. Imagine if you're, especially if you're in healthcare or a finance or a sales org, you're able to track individually a lot of different appointments that are, if you have a big organization of different sales people, this app allows you to centralize the management of the and have a clear visibility of how your appointments are doing, when they're scheduled. You can have different analytics tied to these meetings, and it's really I think they're trying to get a chunk of the business from other apps that already been integrated with Teams. I think they're just trying to get a piece of the pie and put that directly as an experience, because some of these capabilities are tied to the premium tier that Microsoft now is selling with Teams. They have a basic tier, but it's kind of limited to what you can do compared to the premium one.
But that's perfectly makes sense.
Yes,
it's more than welcome. to have
and it's
everything in one
probably
place.
I think if you the way Microsoft has always done this, especially on the M365 front, they never let you pay less. Each year you pay more, but they bundle more services with
Yeah.
what you get. So effectively, you're still getting more for less, but you know, it's sort of a sales pitch.
Um, um,
Okay, next one. Um, around the Power Platform, you're probably already aware. I mean, it's been everywhere for the last 6 months. Since Microsoft was an early investor in OpenAI, and they paid 10 billion to be basically at half of the company. They are really trying to milk that cow, as they say, and put ChatGPT and the underlying technology in every possible avenue, every product that they have. Not that this is a bad thing, of course it's not, but um, it has to make sense. And the way they've done this in the Power Platform, they are trying to, and if we take the Power Apps, for example, this co-pilot experience, where if you're a developer, this is where ChatGPT and generally AI really excels at getting the maximum of a development effort. Making sure people are doing much more with what they with their own skills. So integrating this into Power Apps, integrating this into Power Virtual Agents, the ability for the chatbots to actually use ChatGPT to um, filter out content, automatically scan content from internal sources, and answer common questions without actually having to develop this directly into the experience of Power Virtual Agents really makes a difference. Power Automate as well, the natural language capabilities for flows and automation, as well as Power BI for creating queries and making sure you're able to do much more with the analytics tools. It's just, I think it will make things a lot more easier for people who don't have enough experience building stuff in the local platforms to get them started just a lot easier. That's what this is going to do for sure.
Good stuff. Just off topic, yesterday I used ChatGPT to help for my for my son homework. It was some electric circuit, and it's totally forgot about the negative and minus part of the battery. So I asked him what happened here, and he just apologized. Oh, I missed that part.
I
It
think
did not cause the circuit. So keep in mind that there's room for improvement.
I think the marketing, I mean, generally with ChatGPT, I think marketing, this has done wonders for them. I mean, this has really exploded. I think it was really blown out of proportion at some point. It's really innovative, but somehow I think people just putting a lot more emphasis on its capabilities than it probably can do at this point. It will probably get a lot better over the next year or so. All of that training that was done through people will definitely help them out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're still in the kind of the early stages of AI, and this general AI that would be accustomed to everything. Okay.
But yeah, there's plenty of videos in terms of ChatGPT, so I mean, we'll not.
There's a lot of videos how you can make $10,000 per month using AI. Sort of a clickbait, but yeah. So in terms of Microsoft security, there's always so many things around Microsoft security in terms of news. This is probably the most, outside of the Power Platform, probably the Microsoft security stack is the most hyped thing from Microsoft in the last year. A lot of organizations are trying to use that. A lot of companies are being kind of centralizing their business model to sell Microsoft services or sell consulting services around Microsoft security. So it makes sense for that Microsoft is investing some of its budget to develop the capabilities there. So in terms of what we saw interesting was this news about authentication, the authentication context in Azure AD conditional access, where you can trigger events based on PIM activities. So if somebody elevates a row, you can actually invoke a CA policy based on context, and require MFA, or you can do plenty of things. I think this would really not only this, but everything that they add going forward as a capability. This would actually make CA one of the most used in the enterprise products. What we see is a lot of organizations still have not adopted conditional access for whatever reason, or they're using it for something really basic, sort of a standard out of the box rule or something. And they're using a lot more separate services on the perimeter to secure, instead of adopting a zero trust model. And I think this would really have a market going forward. People with knowledge in specifically on conditional access and kind of the underlying technology would really be of benefit, because at the end of the day, a lot of these services around Defender rely on CA to be configured properly and to be kind of the central mechanism of securing stuff.
100%, and especially when more and more we all rely on the identity part and trying to move away of the traditional boundaries. Any improvement if the securing your identity is definitely step in the right direction. So I really love that this functionality, and 100% it will make sense for a lot of organizations. But yeah, it's just a time for sure. We already saw how there's some security defaults features. So at some point, Microsoft is always trying to help, as you mentioned, organizations which are not that mature or just don't have the enough people to help working to take care of that. So
I think at some point, conditional access will become automatically configured for organizations based on baselines, like the security defaults. Right now, it isn't, because it's still fairly complicated, and it has to be thought out based on the different scenarios.
Entity is in P1 tier.
Yes, and it requires licensing that too. But I think at this point, Microsoft has really put a foothold in all organizations. A lot of the companies are already using E5, the EMS suite that brings you P1 or P2. So
yeah, absolutely. There's much more other benefits which you already showed.
Piggyback in on that. The news that Microsoft is now a leader in, basically one of the leaders in endpoint management. For people here, you probably heard of CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, other vendors, even Palo Alto. I've seen them really drop down, by the way. Microsoft is up there in the Magic Quadrant. Not that Gartner is the absolute authority in this, because we know how marketing works and so forth, but you have to keep in mind that the endpoint capabilities have been in development and have been rolled out just 3 or 4 years ago. And they had no market share. And it really, with Intune and Endpoint Manager, and kind of centralizing all the capabilities into one client on each endpoint, really made the difference. Now, again, Microsoft is everywhere in terms of the organization. So it's really easy for them to sell this or bundle this up with other stuff that orgs are already using. But to me, it seems like the Power Platform is also a leader now in the low-code platforms. They're just everywhere, and I think the endpoint management, along with the full Defender suite, will become a standard in a couple of years. I think CrowdStrike is in the position where when Microsoft Teams was just coming in, Slack was saying, welcome, and it will take you so many years, and Slack was eventually sold, and because they lost all of the market share. I think that's what's going to happen to some of these vendors around security. Regardless of what Microsoft's resume in that field is, I think they're just going to generally eat most of the market there.
Yep.
Okay. One last thing, a bit technical, information barriers for the people who don't know what this is, especially this is really meaningful for the bigger organizations where they go through a lot of acquisitions and mergers. But they still have to keep the acquired company's identity in front of clients, and they have to segregate data. Information barriers is a way to basically put walls around the different services or different organizations that use the same services. So you can have people who are using Teams in one single org, but they will not be able to communicate with each other. They're just living in an island, basically. And it's not a lot more complicated, obviously, but it comes under the it used to be an M365 feature. Now it's under the Purview compliance suite. And they've expanded the capabilities of multi-segmentation, and you can actually define specific policies within specific services. Like you can have information barriers on all services except Microsoft Teams, which would allow the individuals to work with each other, but all of their email, all of their data in SharePoint Online will be totally separated from each other. So they've expanded kind of the limits there. I think it was previously 100. Now they increased to 5,000 segments. So it's a fairly complicated implementation to do information barriers, because you really have to have a visibility to the organization to really implement something like this, as well as a clear communication plan, because people have to be aware what they can and what cannot do. But yeah, it's a welcome feature for organizations where they have 100,000 users plus, and they have multiple companies that are kind of working on their own. This is a good way to implement something like this. And it's sometimes it's just a regulatory requirement. You should be segregating the data. People from the parent org should not be able to get information from the child one, but still contain the cost, have everything in one tenant.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Okay.
Right. So time to move to the main topic for today, which is dive deeper in the Azure Governance framework. So we'll start with cost management discipline, and yeah, let's get started. What's all about? So in general, if we can say the life cycle of cost management, it starts with visibility. So we can't control, manage, or do whatever with something that we don't know. So definitely, this is our first and most important step. In the next slide, you'll see different methods that can help with that, and most importantly, can help to what kind of layer of visibility do you need for your specific need, for your specific organization. Then, of course, is accountability. So understanding the cost from some, for example, from financial team, it's definitely important, but we all agree that these numbers does not make much sense to financial people. So definitely there should be distributed accountability in order the entire, let's say, framework to be scalable. So each of the application team should be, or product owner should be responsible for what they are running and how they're spending their budgets for the organizational cost. We will see how the organizational structure impacting this as well. And then, of course, we're coming to optimizing our costs by using multiple options from Microsoft, which, to be honest, they've been investing hugely in different methods of having better control of your cost in terms of all of these. So visibility, accountability, and options for optimizations.
Especially compared to what it was 5 years ago.
Yeah. Just to recall back to 2 years ago, the Microsoft Ignite cost management roundtable, the majority of people there, they complaining that they just don't understand the cost, and they've been wasting enormous amount of money because of this. Okay, so organizational structure impact of the cost is it's, let's say, I would say it's like the first step. So we have to understand what is the focus of our organization. Are we going to do showback, or we're going to do chargeback? How our let's say product teams or product is structured? Do they have their own budgets? Is it important for them to how to optimize their spending? Are they accountable? Let's say that way, how much they are accountable. So it's really depending on the organizational structure, what we're going to, how we're going to implement, let's say, our cost management strategy. So this also, for example, also include, of course, the way of how we're going to tax resources, because the tax are, let's say, the first steps in that direction. So, and again, for what we're going to use them. So first of all, we have to understand our organizational structure and what is the main goal from the leadership perspective. Because what I've seen a lot is that people from the IT teams, they have different goals than the management and executive teams. So yeah, it's first step. Then, of course, we have to plan our cost in advance. Microsoft provided Azure Calculator, which I'm sure that most of you are familiar with. It's still very useful service where you can have pretty good understanding of what would be your cloud spending. Of course, it will not be able to cover everything. For example, let's say network traffic, but it's still it's cover different offering with different tiers of the resources. So definitely, I would say this is the first place where you can.
And it gives you a very good idea where.
Yeah, where you'll be.
Spend.
Yeah, what you're gonna spend, and yeah, absolutely the first.
Especially on the infrastructure side.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some additional websites. I'm not sure why it's not Microsoft, where you have also very nice. I'll drop it in the video description, where you can also compare EC2 instances between an EC2 virtual instances between AWS and Azure, which is also very handy. So yeah, Azure Calculator, first step, highly recommended. Then another important feature from Microsoft is budget, so we definitely have to use them wisely. We can have multiple budgets depending again of what are our organizational goals, what are our structure. So we can have separate budget from the product owner, which is covering just the specific product. We can have separate budget for and the entire organization, which may be more meaningful for the executive team and finance guys. We may have in specific product different divisions where they may tracking the budgets by itself. We may have even track the, let's say, data part with this budget, so or specific regions. That's also important options. But yeah, budgets are really important, and definitely this should be, let's say, part of your initial creation of the, let's say, landing, the entire landing zone and workload subscriptions.
I think one more very important fact here is you have to assume who has the responsibility in the organization to manage the budget, because a lot of the organizations, this is counted as the IT budget. So IT has the incentive to actually track this down. Where organizations have implemented a chargeback model, then you're basically pushing the ball over to finance, HR, who the business, the actual business that they makes the money. And what we see is there's a really big difference between organizations where the responsibility is just within the IT department, or when it's actually shared, and finance and others have the incentive to actually track down their cost and not just put it over to IT, because ultimately they pay for the service and they don't care about how things are being spent.
And most importantly, that they'll become a bottleneck, and actually you can scale and implement all the best practices that we were talking about today effectively. Because when you have this accountability shared between different teams, actually these teams would have the goal to optimize their spending, and they will come to you and will ask you for help and how you can do that. That's again, a lot of these can be implemented from the very beginning of the, let's say, initial subscription workload creation. Budget is one of these things. By the way, it's taking 48 hours, so keep in mind in your automation plans how to implement that. But yeah, it's also budgets can provide you some ways of doing something when automated, when some risk quota is exceeded or whatever metric that you can fit. Again, we've been talking about the tags. So tags are the, let's say, essential thing that you have to implement in order to have any visibility in the Azure cloud. I will not spend much time in this because you're all aware, even that some people just skip it, but like advice would be, you can use pretty easily your on-prem systems and take what is important from you from there. So, for example, product owner, contacts, teams, or whatever. One important advice is make sure to use policies that enforce tags. In the previous session, we discussed some even built-in options in Microsoft Azure where you can implement tag inheritance. But this is, let's say, something like
it really makes a difference when you make them mandatory, and no resource can be created without a tag.
Okay, so speaking for visibility, as I mentioned in the beginning, what more and more organizations adopt microservices, and having good visibility in large environment where you have hundreds of different or thousands of different microservices running, it's may become a pretty, let's say, pretty hard to be implemented. But there's still some options that you can do. For example, Cube Cost is one of these, which may provide you visibility of the specific services that you developed and how much they consume. So as you see here in this screenshot from KubeCost, you can see that you have pretty good cost for your deployments. And what I've seen in the past is that a lot of organization, again, it just to go back, it's important conversations of the cost management to have someone from the executive team or from the finance, definitely from the finance, because and from the product team, from the product development team, because these features may help to have visibility, which is not that important from the IT team, but may be very important for the people who design and develop the product in the future, who have better visibility in terms of its functionality. So for them, it would be much more important to understand how much is their spending divided across the different part of their large product, and where they can focus together with the dev team to optimize the spending and to dive deeper why this is costing so much. So again, you have good tools for the visibility, just depending on your goals, on your specific workloads. Again, it's really important to take every single option that you can use in order to optimize your spending. So moving to observability. So again, as I said, Microsoft is spending and they spent a lot of time of improving in general the cost management. So here you have a lot of options in the new cost analysis. I would say part of the portal. Right now we have much greater visibility, much easier. You can see everything in terms of it's much more detailed. You can see your spending much more detailed. In the past and right now as well, it's very common to this to be used with Power BI, but also Microsoft have their scheduled export, which for some, let's say, not that very complicated needs. It's still something which will work pretty good.
Yeah, there are a couple of third-party apps, and I think there was a standard one coming from Microsoft in the Power BI store, where you can designate your account, your EA number, that it's called, and you can export all of that information in Power BI, because at the end of the day, that's the real tool for analysis and analytics. But even using just the cost management portal in Azure is sufficiently enough for the people who actually want to do something with cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking with that, it's really in that direction. It's really important also to make sure that you have alerts configured. So this is also important from the budget perspective. So it's remember these times when people have the checkboxes that we have the logs for everything and nobody's looking at this log or so don't
generally IT people don't look at the cost management, so they go into the portal every day.
But definitely cost alerts are something which also needs to be implemented from the beginning of let's say the landing zone creation.
Yeah, and it's also, maybe it's good to mention that this is not strictly the Azure portal in this part is not strictly something that should be available only to the admins or the IT in general. I think since you have the ability to greatly segregate the access, the billing roles, all of the different billing roles that allows you to drill down into the cost management. I think much more people from the business teams need to be involved getting into the portal and monitoring their cost, especially when they have a chargeback model, because Microsoft is actually providing one of the best ways to capture your cost compared to other SaaS services. We've seen even mature services like ServiceNow and you name it, or the kind of the specialized SaaS services. They usually don't have a good way to manage the calls, to look at the calls, to observe what's happening. And here you have so many ways to do this. So it makes sense for non-technical folks who are stakeholders or are involved in the budget planning to make sure they're able to look into this as well.
Yeah. I've seen situation where the IT people are forced to do presentations each month to the leadership of the cost, which it's pretty easily can be skipped, and a lot of people time would be saved if you have a good way of structure your cost, understanding what is important from the leadership, and of course automate this. Again, you can even use Power BI, where you don't need to provide any access or third-party solution with the dashboards. You can create dashboards from here and provide access.
Share them out.
It's just endless.
It has untapped potential.
Absolutely.
Because even organizations are paying third-party companies to create special reports for cost management just because they don't have this capability. Which is kind of insane. But
yeah, unfortunately, the focus on the cost become a bit,
especially at the end of the year.
Yeah, this in the current times, it's companies become a bit more focused on the.
And that's why alerts are very important.
Yep. So, yeah, this was about the exports. Moving forward, about the different type of offerings. So. I've seen a lot of organization in the past don't understand the, let's say, Microsoft model of offering of their services. So it's really important to design even your environments of the applications in a way where you can use different subscriptions for your environments, because just from that you can save a lot of money. So Microsoft provide option of dev test subscription, being pay as you go, or enterprise agreement, where actually the prices are much lower. In general, does not include the software licenses from Microsoft. But the important thing is that they still benefit of reservations, which we'll talk a bit later. So you can achieve pretty significant saving just from that perspective, and have good understanding of how your workloads would be needed. So if the workloads are not used by customers, and their main goal is for development, they can be created in dev test. Also,
or they have low usage, you can still use dev test, right?
I'm not sure for that, but I have to double check about the low usage.
I mean, it may be a contractual agreement, but technically you can still use dev test for something like a small app, or
I think if it's production, you can't.
Because Microsoft doesn't allow you to.
Yeah. Okay. Because it's dev test.
Yeah, it's
but yeah, it's very good. It's very good. It's mandatory, let's say that way. One of the very first things that you have to think about.
Not put everything in production.
Not put everything in production, and again, segregating well your environment. Some people putting for example, QA or staging, they are putting it in the production because they said it's very important. Okay.
The importance doesn't.
Yeah, it may provide better SLA, but no, it's there's other options which can help you to have better redundancy and availability. One thing to note for smaller organization is that if you have a Visual Studio subscription, you can benefit of having a pay-as-you-go dev test subscription. So this is the way of creating it, which again become pretty good advantage. Continue with the right offering. We've touched the Azure reservations, and nowadays more and more services become start benefit from reservations. So, it's important to understand some of the limits, and if you plan to use some service for longer time, definitely this should be the first thing that you have to stop and implement. Of course, it's as you see some of the services that may benefit of that, but um, so, sometimes the reservations are announced, let's say they're in preview, and it's better to have like some kind of process where you check what kind of services are reserved, supporting reservations, because we've seen some organizations where they've been using some services without knowing that they can be reserved, let's say that way, for years, which again can waste a lot of money. And in terms of reservation, we are talking about like 50+% of savings in terms of 3 years. One important thing to note here is that if you can cancel your reservation, but only up to 50K per year in terms of cost. Usually, a lot of organizations are using reservation together with hybrid benefits. You can use the main services for hybrid benefits that you can use is Windows Server and SQL offering. It's very popular for large organizations because they already have the software assurance licenses. So this is the important part here, that these services, these licenses should have software assurance. So, for example, if you have some kind of partnership with Microsoft, keep in mind that the licenses that came as a benefit to you as partner can be used here. So they're not with software assurance. But combining this, you can achieve like 85, more than 80% savings together with the reservation in terms of SQL. It's important to note here that if you don't have these licenses with software assurance, it's always cheaper to start directly with Azure and not buying these licenses in order to save money, because I had the situation where clients have been asked me this, which in general may make sense, but from cost perspective, it does not. So, yeah. New addition to the cost options that you have for improving your cost is saving plans, which, as you see in the figure here, it can be a good addition of the reserved reservations. So the biggest difference is that with saving plans, you have much more flexibility in terms of usage of compute. Actually, you can use every compute services. Comparing with the reservations, you can upgrade the instances in just from specific SKUs, let's say that way. So, for example, if you have reserved VM instances, you can't use this reservation for app services, let's say. And with saving plans, you can. Of course, you're saving a bit less, or you can have VMs from multiple compute times. Of course, you save a bit less, depending of what people agree on bit, but it could be like 15-20% less. However, I would say that this is a great option for situation where you plan to do some kind of modernization of your environment. So you are sure that you're going to use the specific amount of compute. However, you believe that after, let's say, after half a year, you plan to start modernization. And for example, we plan to move from virtual machines to Azure Kubernetes services. So in that case, it's better to think about for saving plans where they would be still beneficial to you and you will be able to use them. So yeah. I touched this, but Azure Advisor is definitely important option which you can use for let's say monitoring the new capabilities of Azure services and optimizing your cost spending, as you see here, and as you probably know. Of course, Azure Advisor can be used for the other disciplines and domains like availability, security, performance, and operational excellence. But in terms of cost, it will show you, for example, some virtual machines which are not used that can be downscale, or some new reservations that have been introduced, some new services which support introduced have been recently introduced that can be used. I get this was so
databases are often highlighted as something.
Yeah, app services is. However, again, I thought I touched this just a few minutes before. Not always Azure Advisor is with up to date. Some of you already know that a lot of services become start benefit from option for reservations, but Azure Advisor is not updated. So it's still good to have this kind of let's say policy in place where you have a look, let's say at least once, or even it's better, let's say on quarter, to have a look at what is the current situation with supporting reservation Microsoft services. With one of my friends here, we've been working on creating custom solution for one of our clients. So actually, it was a pretty nice solution which was doing this by its own and provide report to the stakeholders on quarterly basis. So we discussed about so in Azure Advisor, you get some recommendation based on the usage of the virtual machines. However, it's really, really important to have the right visibility. And together with the tax will not help you to understand what is the actual watts, and thus the specific amount of compute is it's being requested appropriately. So it's really important to have a good IT strategy. So Microsoft also have a lot of options. They added recently they added Azure Monitor Managed Service for Prometheus, so you can have good visibility.
I think it was announced last year. I think we did it on one of the
yeah. So having good monitoring strategy in place will definitely help you to keep your cost optimized and use what you need, actually. Continuing this discussion, we move to the right sizing. I know that a lot of you have been doing this exercise, and unfortunately, this is one of the exercises which is you're always fail, because there's only two options. One is your side is your compute is under provisioned or is over provisioned. So which is pity, but yeah, this one especially, it was very popular in the past. That almost everything was over provisioned, and it's really dependent who is doing this exercise, because there's some specific IT units where really love to over provision stuff like DB teams, etc. But again, auto scaling is the best option, I would say, which can help to adjust your let's say sizing of the instances compute that you need. And also is one of the very fundamental service that you have to use in order to have a good and effective cost spending. So I think we discussed this In the past, Microsoft added multiple options. They added predictive autoscaling, even which can be used on top of the standard autoscaling. So I think that you can find enough information of how to appropriately how to appropriately use this service. In the same direction of right sizing, we have the Azure Spot VMs. Actually, they're virtual machines which we can use, which does not offer any SLA, and we can use as the slide shows for some high performance compute scenarios, batch processing jobs, dev test environment, in general, stateless application. Because the good thing with the spot VMs is that they can bring up to 90% saving of our cost. So again, keep in mind that the termination can actually usually occur with just 30-second warning. So this is definitely for stateless VMs. Another thing that I missed to mention on the in terms of auto scaling is that you can Microsoft added it's a built-in functionality where you can turn off and on virtual machines. You can upscale this by using different automation techniques, but turning on and off your environment, like if you have large organization with multiple dev environments, most probably you may not need even the entire environment to be up and running all the time. So you can get the benefit of turning off. Keep in mind that you have to compare these benefits with other, let's say, options that you have and apply like reservation and saving plans and hybrid benefits. Okay, so talking again about the right sizing, it's important not only for the compute, but also from the storage perspective and data. In general, here in the example, we have the Azure Blob Storage Lifecycle Management, which is widely used, but still not a lot of people understand well the difference between the tiers. And as we all know, the majority of the, let's say, walks are kept for some compliance reasons, where definitely the archive storage is must have. And because the price is like 10 times cheaper than the hot, and also cool storage, it's of course it's definitely important part of the walk storage, but lifecycle management for the data, you can have a look and check what kind of services support it. It's a lot. One important addition to that is keep in mind that the backups support this as well, and you should use it for backups as well. In archive tier, the rehydration, so let's say restoration of the blobs are more expensive, and it may take like, I think it was 15 hours or something, but it's still, you can organize your backup policies in a way where you can have keep some kind of always available nice backup to use and archive the majority of the other backups, which again, this is really important from cost perspective and will bring you a lot of benefits.
Also, most big organizations have a retention and disposition process for the data.
Yeah.
So, but not a lot of the not a lot of the applications actually support this, or they have a implemented process around removing data, because it's generally companies are hoarders as long as they can manage the data. But in the cloud, this doesn't make sense anymore, unless retaining the data is already been paid for, like SharePoint or other service. But when it comes to infrastructure cost, I think when you're implementing something like this, you really have to check with kind of the compliance perspective, make sure you put something in place that would adhere to the business retention and disposition process. Because at the end of the day, it helps you out to remove data, regardless of what it is, as long as everybody's clear.
Yeah. So yeah, keep in mind that don't underestimate the archive tier. It's definitely great. I forgot to mention that there is also you can restore your rehydrate your data much faster because there were another type of priority. So the standard was 15 hours and the high priority was much faster. So we can talk a lot about there's a immutable option of the data, but this is not something which will result much in your cost. So from cost perspective, definitely lifecycle management for the data, including the backups. And moving to the end, try to understand the Azure services and their main purpose. Microsoft provided multiple, let's say, how to say, finding solution maps where you can see which solution is suitable for your specific needs. Don't create VMs with premium disk when you don't need them, because even that you think that your application is very storage heavy, there is an option with a burst where they can handle a lot of your request, let's say. So this is really, really important in terms of not only cost perspective, but generally it's here because of the cost perspective. So again, what I've seen usually is from the storage perspective, VMs created with premium disk, and everything, every storage block is hot tier. It doesn't for walks or for whatever. So pay attention on that and keep in mind that
basically replicating an on-premise environment.
Yeah, and these things does not make much sense when you're small, but when you have them built in, especially with all of these framework and automation provided built-in, let's say, life cycle and way of deploying an entire landing zone with all the policies built in from the beginning will save you a lot of money during your journey in general. And at the end, we have one bonus. Visual Studio subscriptions. This is something which is not, how to say, based on my experience, people are not, I'm not saying not used it widely, but not used it in, let's say, governed way. They are not used it by having some policy or some process how to use it, how to manage it. So keep in mind that your team may benefit a lot of having this playground, which is part of the Visual Studio Professional and Enterprise subscriptions, enterprise offerings, where you're receiving a subscription which you can use with free credits each month, and your team can experiment having new services. So it's important to provide this, first of all, to make sure that everybody is aware of the process of getting that, how to get that, encourage people to use it, to experiment. This may save you money because people will not going to, will have additional way of experimenting and not using some kind of dev test or sandboxes. And also, but it's also important to put some kind of boundaries and I'm not saying governance, putting some security metrics, but at least to measure this usage, to organize this usage. For example, you can create separate management group and apply some.
These subscriptions are visible to the
these subscriptions are visible to the management team. So, yep, I think that was all from today. Would be happy to hear any questions from your side.
Okay, I think we will continue with the. I think we planned this for a sort of a 5-part
Yeah.
series for governance.
So next would be a security part.
Yeah, we'll continue.
Security discipline. It would be. I also believe that it would be pretty
Beneficial, yeah.
pretty interesting.
And we'll focus on. I mean, governance and security will be the theme of this year. So
Yeah.
we'll continue.
You
with
can expect more and more.
more.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having you here. Bye.